Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The People Behind the Profile, a feature dedicated to getting to know the people on our news feed just a little bit better. And today we are back with Ian Mai right here on the show. Ian, thank you for carving out some time, my man. How are you?
Doing so good. Thank you for having me, Joey. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
You're one of the people on my feed, Ian, that really hit me hard every time. And it's mainly your willingness to be open and candid about your path, about your history, and about where you're going, right? And I've always found that mental health is always one of those subjects, especially on social media, that can get one of two main reactions. One is, tell me more. And the
hmm
other is, uh-oh, here we go. But you've kind of made it a very approachable subject. And for that, I had to have you on the show. So let's do this thing. A conversation with Ian Mai about inner strength and impulse mastery. But before you tune out, if you love your impulses, there might be an even better way because at first, even I was a little bit like, uh-oh, do I really want to be responsible for the information that I absorbed today? So the answer is yes, Ian. The answer is yes. I want to be responsible for all that which I hear today. So with that said, let's hear a little bit about you, man, your past, your present, and your future. So let's start backwards. Let's start when you weren't a coach, when you were working at Postman and you were a tech sales guy. That seems like quite a jump. How did you manage to do that?
I've made quite a few jumps. What's funny is that by education, I have an electrical engineering degree, then went into sales, selling software, then started getting into the entire life cycle of a software development. So going from engineering to sales and then now coaching, there is no direction. There's no linear path to career development. So just hearing that, you're probably like, this guy has ADHD. Yep, that's why I do what I do. That's a big part of it. What's interesting with all of it really comes down to over the last decade and a half, I had these really big brief moments of crazy hyper focus, a lot though of kind of hidden masked impulsivity and addiction issues that I was hiding constantly, just constantly masking. And so what's interesting is that, with the rise of my LinkedIn profile and being on people's feeds and being out front on social media, this isn't actually the first time I've done that. So I actually used to be a fitness influencer, and the entirety of my Instagram posts were me in my underwear trying to be as obnoxiously muscular and posing and literally posing, like not just physically for the bodybuilding image that I was portraying, but also posing in the sense of I was just trying to show people my biggest accolades, my trophies, all of my successes, while still really suffering with addiction. For me, it was binge eating. I was still struggling with binge eating despite being 5% body fat on stage as a competitive bodybuilder. I was struggling with binging with internet addiction. I talked about my porn addiction, as taboo as that is, having that in the background while also still, while bodybuilding, still being a tech sales professional, still closing business, being President's Club top performer, and all the while just being extremely dysregulated in my own ADHD patterns that were going undiagnosed and completely unmanaged for pretty much all my life up until that point.
Wow, thank you for sharing all that. And now everybody that's listening is like, okay, Joey, now I understand the beginning of the show when you talked about how open and honest Ian is. There you have it. And we've only just scratched the surface here. And it's so refreshing, Ian. I got to tell you, it's very easy to hide, right?
Mm,
And I feel like, at least for a lot of us, 2020 did that, right? It put us all in our houses and our offices away from people. And I found for me, at least in my walk, spiritually, that the easiest thing to do is to fall by the wayside when you're trying to do it alone, right?
mm,
And maybe, just maybe, as we unpack this subject of ADHD, there will be some validation in that theory. But before we get there to diagnosis and me putting on my jacket here, I want to talk more about the switch, right? And
mm.
for me, I wonder was there more of a pivotal moment that happened, like an aha, wow, I see it light bulb moment, or was it a gradual realization that, hey, there's something not right now?
It actually didn't start with ADHD for me. For me, it actually started with all of the addictions and impulse control issues that I had. So 2020, end of 2020, my pornography addiction and internet addiction turned into cyber sex addiction and infidelity in my marriage. So 3 months after my firstborn daughter was born, my wife finds out about all of that stuff. And it very much so is, hey, you're going to lose your marriage. Your kid's going to be raised by some other man. Some other man's going to, celebrate the most beautiful years of your wife's life. And you're going to be on the outside looking in, wishing to have a seat at the table. It was a big, big turning point for me of this thing that I used to kind of just have on the side that was sort of secret. It was like, it's not a big deal. Now was taking over the entirety of my life. And it demanded, if I really wanted to keep everything that was beautiful and meaningful in my life, that I had to go direct some energy to it. So that's where it started. And inevitably, when I sorted that out, then I was able to start navigating my impulsive spending and the crazy amount of credit card debt that I had come up with, my impulsive eating, and having, after being a professional bodybuilder, having gained 50 pounds of weight, which added a ton of shame that like I'm supposed to be this professional who's super disciplined and physically fit, and yet crazy overweight, crazy dysregulated. So interesting enough, I didn't actually happen upon, oh, this is all just symptoms of unmanaged ADHD until honestly, only about a year and a half ago that I was able to piece all this together. So I started coaching about 2 years ago, but it was all of these different piecemealed impulse control issues, which were super nebulous and didn't really mean anything. And it was only until after a coach was like, Ian, you coach ADHD, just call it ADHD coaching. And that's honestly been the thing that I have been focusing on, using that language. And even though the coaching isn't necessarily impulse control, now it is, how do I turn the ADHD professional into a hyper performer at will in the moments that they care about, not intermittently, not in just these brief moments that they're like, I don't know how I turned it on in that moment, but I seem to. How do I recreate that? How do I do that without burning out and hating everything and not being present at home, not being able to go without that alcoholic beverage to wind down after the evening's all done? All of those things combined turned into what it is now of really helping people regulate in the way that I've been able to develop for myself. Lost 60 pounds of fat, being able to get rid of $60,000 of debt, being able to go 2 years without any alcohol. Not that that's everybody's goal, but even getting the point where like I don't feel the need for those things. I'm not missing out in my life, not having those things part of it.
Wow. I want to follow up there. I have some follow-up questions for you, Ian. At what point, you mentioned that you started to kind of learn the terms for what you're enduring about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. At what point did the term of a dopamine audit hit, and what did you discover about the role of dopamine in your life? Because for me, all I think of when I hear the word dopamine is drugs, and that's it. So
Right. Yeah.
help us to understand what that means really.
Yeah. So the dopamine audit actually started in my addiction coaching and only moved into the ADHD space as I started to give language to it. So that was always part of the process for me when it came to creating very objective reasoning around behavior. So the big problem with dopamine is that for years, media, news were always constantly comparing all of dopamine to cocaine. Blah 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 amounts of sugar is just as bad for your brain, or it just releases the same chemical as cocaine does. It's like, well, that one, it was such a sensational way of navigating it that now we've treated dopamine, any dopamine seeking is negative. Any dopamine seeking is a bad thing. Here's the thing: you need dopamine to do any movement. For me to move my finger right now and for my brain to signal move that finger, dopamine is required to make that happen. It is not all hedonic pleasure seeking addiction. It's not. The interesting thing about the ADHD brain, though, is that part of my brain has a high mapping of dopamine and other parts of my brain naturally doesn't. And so part of the difficulty with the ADHD experience is we're constantly trying to get dopamine to that frontal lobe, to that part of our brain that's reasonable, objective, has the executive functioning. The problem is how we get that dopamine is what we lack objective reasoning about because we're just trying to feel normal. We're just trying to feel the same level of acuity that everyone else seems to walk around with without necessarily having to fight for it.
Some things kind of make sense, right? There seems to be a need for structure and order in understanding how this impacts you, right? So, how did you take all the info and turn it into a three component framework to help other people that aren't you?
Yeah, I think that was interesting because very early on for me, as I started navigating my own addictions, is that I was very intrinsically pulled towards, hey, someday you're going to help people with this. Someday other people are going to benefit from what you're learning. And just the idea, the notion of that just lit my soul on fire. Like I felt so much energy, intrinsic motivation, and honestly, dopamine anytime I would think about sitting across from somebody and sharing the lessons that I'm learning. And so a big part of it was, hey, this needs to be reproducible. This needs to be scalable. This needs to be something that anybody can learn these systems and habits and practices and be able to recreate it. And so it's interesting about my exercise background and even the bodybuilding. I did coaching in that space that it was, hey, the structure and practices and habits of exercise lend to this very well. How can I build a system that progressively overloads these practices and habits that allow me to create objective reasoning and building my threshold for boredom and all of these components that allows me to direct my dopamine more effectively were things I knew that I need to be able to recreate and scale for others.
That's phenomenal. If you're just joining us, we're with Ian May, and you are on the People Behind the Profile. We're getting to know Ian a lot better today, and I feel like he's getting to know me. I feel seen. I feel seen in a lot of ways here, Ian. I've always dealt with kind of being not the smartest kid in the room, right? Sometimes one of the most creative, but always had a challenge in putting those pieces together, right? Staying organized, staying on task. So much so that I feel like it really hindered me back in a time when this kind of discussion was not happening. The
Mm-hmm.
first reaction from the medical community would be, hey, put them on some meds, dope them up, send them to school, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I did go through that for sure. I had my fair share of ADHD meds when I was in high school, but I still noticed that the tendencies and behaviors were still there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So could drug me up, but still the issues that were causing those symptoms were not being dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, how prevalent is that with people, say, in their 40s, right? That maybe graduated high school, late 90s, early 2000s, and any talk about like men, especially, and their mental health was very taboo. So, when did you start to find that this kind of discussion was becoming a little more acceptable?
I think that's something that honestly I've only even seen in the last couple of years, but part of it is because I've sought it out. And so I think this is kind of that event horizon that every man goes through when it comes to exploration of mental health is that there's actually a lot of other men who are trying to answer these questions too. And even being able to say, hey, this didn't work for me growing up, or there was something about the nature of the culture of masculinity for us as children that like doesn't sit right with me anymore, that now all of a sudden I'm needing to ask the question of like, well, maybe I need to go do this differently. Maybe the way that my father handled these emotions or my mother handled these emotions aren't actually useful. And being able to be comfortable with challenging their perceptions, their beliefs around emotional regulation and emotional health and being able to champion it, I think that we've started to magnetize towards each other. That all of a sudden, other men who see me wearing my obnoxious, rucking camo vest, doing flexing, but then also wearing pink sunglasses and pink shoes. That it's like, okay, this guy doesn't take himself seriously. Like there's a reason why I want to go have this conversation with them. Hey, I'll
Mhm.
cry with you. If we need to cry together, let's cry. And even from your and my spiritual perspective of looking to spiritual people, and even for me in my own faith walk, looking at Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he says, my soul is crushed to the point of death. Will you stay with me? He says that to his three closest friends. Did they respond super well to it? No, not necessarily. But the fact that somebody who is essentially the cornerstone of a whole faith group is that vulnerable, that honest, that emotional, today's day and age, you might have them like, dude, man up. What the hell, man? That's weird. Why would you even say that? Or maybe you should talk to somebody about that, but not me. But being able to recognize that, hey, not only is it our responsibility to share when you are suffering and when you are struggling, but it is also our responsibility to increase our capacity to sit with somebody else in their suffering.
Man, that's big. And being a married man, I know how easy it is to want to be the solution provider in that moment.
Hmm.
And sometimes, I don't know about you, Ian, but sometimes people just need us to listen and take on that heavy load. And really, I saw this quote earlier and it really hit me because I have not always been that friend for my friends.
Hmm.
Sometimes when things get heavy, I have a tendency, and ask my wife, she'll tell you that I offset it with humor. Sometimes things are hard and I'm like, too hard, got to make this funny, got to get out of this some way. So I feel like there's a little bit of that in all of us. Maybe it manifests differently, but your ability to create this framework and name things specifically, three parts: the emotional escape, the lack of objective reasoning, and conditioned dopamine responses. Ian, can you explain how these three things interact?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's interesting about, for one, the ADHD experience is the fact that we do have dopamine, but it's usually around the emotional centers of our brain. And so part of the reason why you struggled with your ADHD experience in high school when you just solved for the dopamine to the frontal lobe is that you weren't solving for the hyperactive amygdala. You weren't solving for the hyper emotional part of your brain. You weren't solving for emotionally regulating and de escalating the big emotional triggers. And so what's interesting about the ADHD brain is that more often than not, what's commonly seen is that our amygdala is actually smaller than the average or neurotypical brain, which you'd think that would mean it's less active. What it actually means is smaller triggers will have a bigger response than the neurotypical brain. So the neurotypical brain, we might all agree. Everybody agrees this trigger is a 10. And to the neurotypical brain, they're like, hey, it's a 10 out of 100. Not that big of a deal. It's an ant bite. They'll look at us and they see us, it's a 10 out of 10 for us. It's an atomic bomb. Like, hey, the world's ending right now. My rejection sensitivity dysphoria is going through the roof. My rumination, my catastrophizing. I'll never have any friends. No one will ever love me. I'm too much for people. And I'm just blah, 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 getting all crazy. And they're like, hey, dude, why are you getting so emotional about this?
Mm,
Why is this such a big deal for you right now? I'm like, well, for me, there's an atomic bomb going on in my brain right now. How do I develop some emotional regulation, some emotional habits, some objective reasoning about the emotions, even, and creating a little more space for me to be able to have healthy emotions while also being able to not agree with every story the emotions are telling me.
mm. Right? Because isn't it easy to believe our own bullshit sometimes? To wallow in self-pity because it feels good, right? Every music video, every love ballad of the 80s is, oh, why doesn't she love me? I bought her flowers, man. But maybe there's something more there, bro. I don't know. Investigate for yourself. But no, real talk, man, is that it shows itself in our lives. I think that it begs the question, how can that emotional escape manifest nowadays in 2025? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and how do you see clinicians trying to identify it? And are they doing a good job, or are they, in your brain, in your mind, kind of taking an easy path and just doping people up with, psychotrops and Ritalin, Adderall, that kind of stuff?
So I think for me, what's interesting is I run into a lot of people who are coming to me saying, hey, I actually have no interest in getting diagnosed because I don't want to go the medicinal route.
Hmm.
And so for a lot of people, they're actually coming to this from the perspective of, I don't care if I'm technically ADHD or not. I'm going to act and operate as if I am. And all of these skills work for the neurotypical person who just is more dopamine dysregulated, as well as the ADHD brain. They both work. It's still useful. And so the bigger component of this is emotional regulation is a skill. And that is part of the problem that most people aren't aware of is that even for my ADHD brain, I can build habits for emotional regulation. I can develop the skill of being more comfortable with the heightened amygdala response, being more capable of noticing it sooner, being able to practice habits of grounding and breath work and meditation and mindfulness, being able to de-escalate when cortisol's high, adrenaline's high, visceral blood pressure, heart rate is high. I can have these practices and habits. And so that's a significant part of this of being able to develop the skills. And we do this even with our children of the sooner you can name the emotion, the sooner then you can tame it, the sooner you can address it. Hey, I notice you're feeling frustrated. mirroring it back to somebody. I can see that you're feeling frustrated. Tell me more about that. What are you feeling? What else are you noticing? We use that language with small children now because we're, starting to develop habits around early childhood development, but we still don't do that for ourselves. If I could have that same level of practice and habit for myself, oh, hey, I'm noticing I'm ruminating about this thing. Oh, I'm noticing I'm feeling anxious about this interview. Now what? Now that I'm noticing, first celebrate that I noticed. Hell yeah, noticed. Celebrate it. Now that I notice, I can actually take action rather than reaction. What can I
Mm.
do? Okay. Noticing my fear of rejection or my fear of criticism, noticing it. What can I do? All right, I'm still choosing to move forward within my values. What are my values? I love empowering people. There's going to be some people who are going to reject this and criticize it, but I'm more excited about the people who are going to feel empowered and seen and heard and are going to be able to say, hey, that Ian guy, he gets me. And in fact, I bet he would be in my corner. I'm going to reach out to him. I'm going to connect with them. He feels safe. It's that. It's being able to start with the noticing. Big exhale. Okay, notice my heart rate. What can I do to slow that down? I'm noticing some adrenaline. What can I do with that? I'm going to shake my hands out a little bit. I'm going to jump up and down and shake the adrenaline. I'm going to shake my jaw where the adrenaline's locking me up. There are things that I can practice in habits of grounding, but I can't do any of that until I notice. Can't do any of that until I hear myself say, oh, I'm noticing the ruminating. It's a different part of your brain that performs the I am noticing function. That is part of the executive function. That is part of more of your reasoning, logic part of your brain that now can be able to tell the lizard part of the brain that's super excited not to calm down because no one ever has calmed down when somebody tells them to calm down. It's, hey, the emotion's valid. But the story I'm telling myself, like, hey, that's not serving me. Hey, thanks,
Mm.
brain, for trying to keep me safe, but here's how I'm going to move forward. And there's just this nuanced difference to how the body responds to that, like gentleness and loving connection and acceptance that actually lights our ADHD brain up rather than continues to shame it and guilt it and beat it up and create more contention that turns our ADHD brains off.
Wow. It seems like, Ian, that you figured it out in a lot of ways, and nobody's figured everything out, right? We're on the path, and I know you would never say you have, but it seems as if for you, you found what works for you, right? And you've learned ways to apply these insights, which is actually wisdom, right? You've taken knowledge and applied it, which is the definition. So what did that look like for you? I mean, I know you do perhaps some journaling, you're still in great shape. What are some of the self-regulation tools that you use? And do you see them working for other people? And what would you say to the guy that's like, I don't journal, man. I'm not into that stuff. How do you break those walls down?
Yeah. So the first one, pretty much consistent for anybody who's ADHD, diet, exercise, and sleep is non negotiable. Like being able to develop habits where even if you can't go to the gym and be a bodybuilder, you can still go for a walk around the block. Even if you can't necessarily go for a walk around the block, you can still do some glute knee mobility exercises at your desk. Being able to mobilize blood flow to the frontal lobe, extremely critical. The other part of this, when it comes to journaling, do you need to write something out in order for that? It's called hemispherical lateralization, getting that logical part of your brain to activate. Journaling helps with that because there's mechanical function, there's seeing your own writing, that feedback loop. But in the same way, if you don't journal, say it out loud. Hear yourself say it. Oh, hey, I'm noticing. Oh, hey, I'm noticing the fear story. Oh, I'm noticing the I'm not good enough story. Oh, I'm noticing the whatever thing that's coming up. If you hear yourself say it, the mechanics of saying it from a muscle standpoint, hearing yourself say the thing from an auditory standpoint, all creates that hemispherical lateralization. So even if you're not necessarily writing it down and you're worried about like now all of a sudden I'm blocked because I hate my handwriting and now I'm thinking about being told my handwriting sucks and I hate the way that my voice sounds. I don't even necessarily want to record it or don't even feel like pulling my phone out. Even just hearing yourself say, I'm noticing is more powerful than you thinking and ruminating and catastrophizing. Thinking a thing is not the same as hearing yourself say a thing.
That's huge. And it's true, right? Because how many times have we all thought the same repetitive, redundant thought and then wonder, like, why can't I get out of my head? Well, maybe it hasn't been named. Maybe there hasn't been an identity of that thought, right? So either
Mm-hmm.
spoken out loud or put on paper so we can at least see it or hear it. I know we all learn differently, right? I absorb more through my ears auditorily than I do through my eyes oftentimes. So that's very interesting. I love how you opened up the show, Ian, talking about boom, this is where the rubber hit the road for me. I realized like my marriage was worth it. My relationship with my kids was worth it. That is a huge responsibility and undertaking to help other people put those pieces together.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for the work you're doing to keep families together because I firmly believe that the family is the number one thing that holds society together.
Mm.
When family goes, so goes the community and neighborhood, right? And I think that's catalyst for a lot of problems that we see in our inner cities where there's a single parent, latchkey kids, sometimes housed by aunts, uncles, grandparents, and there's just not that structure, that discipline, that, male, female. I go to mom for this, I go to dad for this. I know dad's a heavy hand, but he's also heavy heart and he can handle it and mom's going to be there. And so having that is just so huge. And I'm so blessed that I had it. And there are a lot of kids that didn't. So
Mm-hmm.
with all that said, in my my rambling there, Ian, is what do clients, especially the men, what have they said and noticed after working with you after some time?
Yeah. So most of the men that I work with, what they'll notice is that they have such an increased emotional capacity that they are prepared to sit with the emotions of every person in their family. And that they are the rock, the emotional rock for every other person around them. And not only do they thrive on it, it is not responsibility or duty or some sort of unmet expectation on themselves for what a man it means to be a man, but like this true feeling of I feel present enough that I can sit with my daughter's big tantrums as a 5-year-old because she's got plenty, right? Because I'm not responding aggressively or loudly or angrily because I'm not able to sit with her big feels. I am so confident in my own feelings and emotions that I've got room for others.
Mm.
And I think for every man that I work with, they're usually feeling that called to leadership, that they want to lead and lead well. And now all of a sudden they're showing up when in the past they would be either one indifferent or apathetic or even kind of numb. And that numbness scares them. And this is part of the ADHD experience of if there's an emotion that literally your brain turns off to and you feel apathy towards, it's likely because that emotion wasn't allowed when you were a kid or didn't feel safe when you were a kid or was met with ridicule and criticism or even violence, like real big trauma. Noticing it, being able to notice when that apathy is showing up for you. I can notice. Oh, I can notice my brain's turned off emotionally. My kid's having a tantrum and I'm just not here right now. Hey, despite the apathy, despite the story I'm telling myself that it's 3 a.m., I don't have time for my daughter's nightmares that she's having right now. I just want to, pat her on the butt, go send her back to bed. Daddy needs to sleep. No, instead, I release the apathy in the stories I'm telling myself. Yeah, of course I'll come sing you a song and sing you to sleep and be here for you. It's those moments when all of a sudden I get calls back from clients saying, hey, dude, I did it. I noticed this apathy. I noticed complete, abject, like nothingness. I felt blank. And yet I still showed up in this beautiful way. It wasn't masking, it was aligned within my values. It is within the identity that I tell myself as this family man and leader within my household. It's beautiful.
Wow, that is beautiful. If you're just joining us, you are on with Ian May. The people behind the profile is what you're watching. And this is where we go, friends, to get to know the people on our news feed just a little bit better. And we're digging in deep, right? We've been together for about 30 minutes right now, Ian, and I have a couple more questions. And I want to say the hardest hitting for last, and that is how on earth could pornography be so dangerous, right? Because after
Mm,
all, I'm going to take this side of it because I know there are men watching this saying, dude, get real. Like, I'm not cheating on my wife. So what? I'm watching a video of some other chick. Like, I'm not calling her. I'm not texting her. This is a quick interaction. Bing, bang. I'm done. Downstairs for dinner. Now I can be the family man because the edge is gone. The tension's
mm,
gone. Yada,
mm-hmm.
yada, yada.
Yeah.
Do you hear that story a lot? Is that commonplace after people open up? And then also, What does that look like for your clients, but also for you, Ian?
Yeah. So the first thing, yes, I hear everything under the sun of, hey, every man does it. So whether they say they do or not, if they say they don't, they're lying. Every guy does it, or if they're not doing it, they should be doing it. It's healthy. It says that I'm supposed to get off this many times a week if I want to have healthy testosterone level. Any mind you, I say these are what my client says. These are also things that I used to say. Hey, it just helps me relax, helps me fall asleep at night, it helps me be more present with my wife because she's not always putting down. I'm, blah blah. I'm a man. I need to have this, that, and the other thing. The reason why it's problematic is that when I look at it just from a dopamine standpoint, the height and extreme spike of dopamine that comes from pornography and orgasm is so high that you can reinforce any belief, any behavior, any identity, any internal visceral experience leading up to it, including shame, including sadness, including any number of things that now, when your body is feeling bored or low dopamine, it'll actually create the emotional response first. It'll start with the shame. It'll start with the sadness. It'll start with the feeling disconnected from your wife. It'll start with all of those things because in the past, you've conditioned it to create that or to feel that in order to trigger you to this big dopamine spike. All of that to be said, of now when I look at pornography from an objective reasoning of my biggest spikes of dopamine are reinforcing isolation and disconnection from my wife. Unless this is something that you do together and there's oxytocin of you together being in the room together, unless this is something that like, hey, you're creating it and the two of you are watching your own stuff, by all means, you do you, like let your freak flag fly, but also be aware that you are reinforcing the biggest identity beliefs and behaviors that are leading up to that experience. And do I want to keep reinforcing anything that causes me to feel disconnected from my wife? For some people, and for me, this was the moment of I refuse to let any belief come into play that says my wife is not the most important person in my life. I refuse. And so for me, that came down to pornography is out because that is only reinforcing isolation, disconnection, and any number of beliefs that I might have about what I am or I'm not getting from sexual intimacy, what I am, I'm not getting within the bounds of that. No, if there's things that I'm actually sexually driven by that do create healthy intimacy and trust and connection, my and I have created an environment in our bedroom where we can have healthy dialogue and conversation about it. As you can imagine, coming out of infidelity like that, my wife and I had to work really hard on how do we make the bedroom feel safe for both of us all over again. Not just for her, but for me as well. We had to build that. We had to practice that. That is a skill. It is something that you can apply mathematical reasoning to. Push my glasses up there for that you can actually apply that to. How do I make the bedroom feel safe for my wife again, knowing that she's experienced this type of betrayal and distrust? That was a process. We had to build that. And so now it's like, I am not willing to forego any of that for this immediate, simple thing. If there's things that I'm feeling that aren't being met, we have a conversation about it. Hey, babe, I just want to let you know, like, I love you. I know this wasn't your intention, but like, I'm actually feeling my love tanks at like a 3 or 4 right now. Like, I feel like we haven't really connected a lot recently. Hey, physical touch, I know that's important to me from a love language standpoint. Could we plan in the next 24 hours to do some massage, to do something, to like have something that aligns us in that realm of intimacy, not just sex in intimacy? All of that's part of it. And so like I'm really, beating a dead horse on this one, rather than beating off. Puns are fun. Uh, this is part of it. Like this is honestly obsessing about all those details. Like that is what's helped me and my wife build more intimacy and trust. And quite frankly, 5 years later, after we're almost exactly 5 years later from that point of building that trust and intimacy where we had a second child and our love and marriage is better than it's ever been. Our communication and trust is better than it's ever been. And I feel on my side more heard, more understood, more loved, and more connected, which is all the reasons why most men end up turning to pornography in the first place.
So for the guy that's listening to this, it's like, I don't know how to take on like, this is I just not intending to take action on this, right? But there's something stirring. Maybe there's a follow-up question having to do with their individual walk. And I love the fact that just strictly from a scientific standpoint, you have your T's crossed and your I's dotted because it makes sense, right? It passes the muster. So, what can people do besides obviously we're going to post links for people to connect with you and your coaching services, but let's talk a little bit more about what they can expect from your offerings like the ADHD and Impulsivity 101, the self-assessment webinar workbooks like the porn cyber sex freedom. You talked about, just case in point how it's worked for you, but is it more of something for men to do on their own and then discuss that with their wife, or is this something designed for couples to work through together?
Yeah. So what's interesting with the ADHD coaching is that the porn addiction and impulsivity stuff has actually kind of taken a backseat because of the fact that we're going to look at your entire spectrum of dopamine, and that'll just be one part of it. And I think that's the bigger part that people are like, hey, I don't want to go get a porn addiction coach like that. Super uncomfortable, but also the upside doesn't feel very high. Whereas when we look at ADHD holistically from a well rounded perspective, it's, hey, we're going to help you be more performative in your job, more performative and capable at home, and more present in all of the things. And the outcome of that is going to be more regulation and awareness of your porn habits, more emotional regulation around what you're eating, more regulation around all of these other patterns that you're actually just focused more on the upside of everything in your life rather than necessarily going into each of these individual topics and honestly feeling a lot of shame and guilt over it. It's been pretty nuanced in that change. And part of that is because we're so focused on the excitement and energy that's drawing us towards the things that we're motivated by. I brought up in my early stages of I was afraid some other man was going to love my wife, some other man was going to raise my daughter. That fear got me started. That motivation doesn't last long.
Hmm.
Motivations from fear of what you're going to lose, motivations from what you're not doing, the gaps actually aren't necessarily very useful. I have to start focusing then on what is the upside that I'm working towards. And inevitably, the upside was I believe that I'm capable of having the most loving, connected marriage possible. I believe that for myself. And in fact, I believe that I can become some other man who's celebrated as the leader of his household, the spiritual leader, the emotional leader, obviously a physical leader in terms of stature, but more importantly, I'm more emotionally safe for every other person in my house. I believe I'm capable of that. That's the thing that I'm working towards. That's the vision. And now that I'm living it, because quite frankly, I'm living in that place now, 5 years later, now I'm also, every time I feel grateful for what I have, I'm praying into that past version of me. I'm celebrating him. I'm encouraging him. And it's that difference of what's pulling me forward rather than what I'm running away from that keeps me in the saddle for the longest period of time. That's what the coaching is. That's what the work is. The output of that is you're more aligned in your job. You're able to set healthier boundaries with people at work. You're working harder because you know why you're there in the first place. You're able to shut off from work so you can be more present with your family because you're not as afraid to go home at the end of a long day. All of that stuff combines into, hey, we're going to navigate all of this from your ADHD informed approach.
That's huge. I mean, I guess the best question to follow that up with is where can people sign up? But then honestly, the next question is I know I'm hearing in the back of my brain, I have a network of men on LinkedIn that are saying, dude, I'm not some like creepy porn guy. Like I don't even watch it. I don't even know if I have any of these, ADHD tendencies. Like, what's the best way for people to not get neurotic about this, but still improve on a practical level, in your opinion?
Yeah. So the biggest thing to be able to look at, the reason why people start working with me is that they're noticing 10 to 15 hours or more per week that's lost to inattention, distraction, and quite frankly, lack of purpose within their day, within their work, within the amount of time they're spending with their family, just not being all there. And more often than not, people are losing 15 plus hours a week to that type of dysregulation. And so the question really is, hey, if I could get back 10 to 15 hours of productivity and connection and intimacy within my home, within my family, like what would that mean to me? What could I do with that? Could I start that side project? I worked a corporate job while doing a side business of coaching, while also volunteering, writing devotionals, and doing pastoral work for a nonprofit. Like, did all of that stuff all at the same time because I was able to increase my emotional bandwidth on a weekly basis. That's the upside. What is that upside for you? Is it just more time present with your family? Well, great. Let's go make work not continue to last into the late hours of the evening so you can be more present. So you're not at the dinner table ruminating about that customer call that didn't go as well as it should have, that customer call you have next week that you're catastrophizing already, that it hasn't even taking place yet. You're not hitting your numbers, whatever that thing is that you lose the most hours of sleep and dysregulation and so on. Let's go build habits and strategies. And I love this part because today I literally got a text message from a client that said, hey, I put everything in place with how I'm showing up and the confidence that I have in conversations that I've been having at work. Today I just landed a $60,000 raise. He didn't think that he was deserving of it or had any reason to ask for it. And every time that he felt himself wanting to ask for a raise, he would stop himself because he's like, I don't want to sound like a dick. It's like, well, what are you worth? How can we quantify that? How can we objectify that? How can we make sure that you're continuing to show up every day in this way that now is bringing up the value of every other person around you, at home, at work, everywhere you show up? That's the goal. That's the vision.
Sounds like some instantaneous ROI there. I mean, a $60,000 deal. I can't imagine what that's doing for him. And then confidence begets confidence, right? So he's going to be cresting from that move. And it's like, hey, if I can do that, what can't I do? Right.
Mm-hmm.
This has been awesome. Ian May, thank you so much for your time. And I gotta say, y'all need to connect with this guy at the very least. Follow his journey on LinkedIn. He's a great follow, as they say. And if nothing else, engage with his content, get to know him, comment, and like his stuff because it's easily likable. We are going to post all the links to all of your resources, Ian. And if you find yourself finding trouble focusing, if you find a disruption there in your relationships, even with your relationship with yourself, guys, right? If you can't sit with yourself in silence without your cell phone for 15 minutes while you're sitting on the John, something worth thinking about there, right? So we'll post all the links, connect with Ian. And Ian, thank you so much for your time today and being right here on the People Behind the Profile. God bless you, sir.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.